get the recording started and turn the microphone over to Geoff Spencer, who's going to facilitate our discussion of some very challenging brick walls. It's all yours, Geoff.
Thanks, Debbie. Just put up our brick walls slide. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to you all today about some of the brick walls that some of your peers have raised in the last few months. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about these today. We actually have 6 brick walls to cover today, and I think most of the folks that raised these questions are going to be here, if not all. The first one we'll cover is concerning Tessie Jaffa, who is, I believe, the great aunt of Joseph Sachs, who raised the issue. We're going to talk about William Levine, who is Stan Levine's grandfather, and Bela Goldie Moralovitz, which was raised by Barbara Miller, and then Esther Vinocur Siegel from Sue Feldblum, and Morris Zelig Katz from Barbara Levy, and finally Ida Guterman Wagger, I'm not sure which one it is, from Rob Vatz. And this is a bunch of mostly pretty darn hard brick walls, so I appreciate everybody bringing these to me. And as I said, you know, we're going to start out with a kind of a process that we're going to go through for each one of these brick walls. We'll start out by reviewing the brick wall item. I'll tell you what the specific question is that the person has asked. And then there will be an opportunity for each of you to provide your suggestions for how this brick wall might be addressed, or, you know, how further information data might be obtained. In order to do that, you know, when you have an idea, if you would like to have the opportunity to speak and share your idea with everyone, please raise your hand. And I will call on you. I say I will. I'm going to ask Debbie to help me with that. It's a little bit hard to spot sometimes if someone has raised their hand, and I want to make sure that we don't miss anybody. In order to raise your hand, we're going to use this feature that Zoom has to allow you to electronically raise your hand. And in order to access that, you use the menu in the toolbar at the bottom center of your screen. It's the right-hand button, which is labeled Reactions, and you can click on that button at the right hand of that end of that toolbar. And then there will be a series of options that will open up, and you can choose Raise Hand. And what that will do is put a little icon of a raised hand that Debbie was just showing me a minute ago. It'll put that in the corner of the little window showing your picture, and then there will be an opportunity for either myself or for Debbie to recognize that you have something to contribute. Okay. And then finally, once everyone has had a chance to make their suggestions, then we'll take a look at some of the ideas that I came up with, you know, having the advantage of some extra time to look into the question a little further ahead of time. So as I said, we're going to start off first with Tessie Jaffa. This is a question raised by Joseph Sachs. And Joseph is asking, what in the heck happened to my great aunt, Tessie Jaffa, or Jaffa? She was born in April of 1886 in Russia and immigrated into the US in 1890, according to the 1900 census, or if you look at the 1910 census there, it's shown as 1898, one of the two or somewhere in between. She was fairly young, obviously, when she came over. And then in 1910, she married a man named Morris Fleischman in April of 1910 in Baltimore. And she lived with Morris in Dunn, North Carolina in 1910 when the 1910 census was taken. And then they had a daughter in 1911. The daughter was named Ethel, and Joseph has not had any success in finding that birth certificate for Ethel, unfortunately, because it would no doubt provide a wealth of information. So Joseph has not been able to find any further trace of Tessie after 1911, after the birth of her daughter Ethel. So where the heck did she go? He has some, some inklings what might have happened. First of all, Morris was found living with his third wife, who was named Mary or Dorothy, in Dunn, in the same place, in the 1920 census. So, clearly Tessie was not in his picture any longer in 1920. But Joseph has not found any death, burial, or divorce records for Tessie. And then he's got this rumor that he hears from one of his cousins that Tessie may have been institutionalized. And one of the things that I think Joseph is most interested in pursuing is this possibility of institutionalization. And it's a really, thorny issue. How do you get records for someone who's been institutionalized? What paper trail is there that would support that that event occurring? And how would you ever prove that this happened to somebody? So that's something that we'll look at. But before we go there, what are your suggestions for Joseph?
You can either chat a question also, or as Jeffrey said, you can raise your hand either virtually or as I'm doing right here. I do have a question for Joseph. How does he know about Ethel? How did he figure that out if there was no birth certificate? And has there been any effort to find out more information about her? And I see a comment coming in here from Stan. Could she have died in childbirth? Possibly referring to, of course, Tessie. Is Joseph on the line with us? And can he unmute?
I did not see Joseph.
I don't see him either. Okay. Of course, as Debbie pointed out, there would be a death record if she died in childbirth. Okay. I see some. Debbie Moose, you want to unmute?
Okay, first of all, I think Rob has been in communication with Joseph about some of this because he has a distant connection to Ethel Fleischman. And I think he's provided all the information he has about that to Joseph. But institutionalization at that particular time, I assume she would have been institutionalized in North Carolina. And so I had to look for this with one of my ancestors. Of course, and at that particular time, it would have been either Dix here in Raleigh or in Morganton in the mountains. And what I discovered in researching that, one of my relatives died in the Morganton asylum for crazy people. My husband said, not surprised. But I did find out that at that particular time, people may have been institutionalized at the insane asylums for a number of different reasons besides mental illness. At that particular time period, there was no nursing homes, nothing like that. So if somebody had a stroke or an accident on the farm and the family couldn't afford to or wasn't able to take care of them, they might have been sent to one of the institutions. They do keep death records. It's really difficult to get them. The way that I found a record, I'm trying to remember how I found a record on my ancestor. I think I started just sort of randomly Googling about the Morganton Asylum, but if it was done, she may have been at Dix. I think I just started kind of randomly Googling about that. There was also Butner, and people, again, that was considered a prison, I think back then, but also they offered treatment for things like alcoholism, I believe, at that particular time. And so one of Rob's ancestors died in Butner, to which I said, always you y'all were criminals. Anyway, finally found a black sheep in his family.
Okay.
I was really pleased to finally find one. But he may have been there because he was an alcoholic. We're not 100% sure about why he was there. But I started sort of Googling information in general about the possible asylums. And I
Okay.
did, and I did end up finding out that my ancestor at Morganton was buried on the grounds, and I found a picture of her gravestone.
Okay.
And now, a reason that somebody might be buried on the grounds, um, they said usually it was if the person died there and the family didn't have enough money for the body to be returned home. So that's my contribution here.
And Maida's suggesting that that looking in the 1920 census, where when institutionalized people should have been enumerated, might be another clue. And I
Good
see
suggestion.
Jeffrey's nodding his head.
Mhm.
Okay,
Good
Jeff,
suggestion.
what would you? And also, if the husband is still undone, look at hospital and police records from the early 1910s. Yeah.
Good one. Useful suggestion. Anyone else? Okay, well, I'll go ahead and show you what I came up with. And okay, so as Debbie was just telling you, there were two state hospitals for the white mentally ill in operating in 1920. Dorothea Dix in Raleigh, and Broughton Hospital is the name of the hospital in Morganton that Debbie was referring to. And that one was primarily serving the western part of North Carolina, but not exclusively. So, you know, one would want to check both of those. I'm sorry, I didn't catch who else suggested a moment ago using the 1920 federal census. But that's an excellent suggestion. And in fact, the populations of those hospitals were enumerated. And in the case of Dorothy Dix Hospital, it's enumeration district 0140 in Raleigh, Ward 4. And there's just under 1,200 people at Dorothea Dix enumerated in that ED. And then there's an ED for Broughton Hospital in Morganton, which was District 0202 in Morganton, and there's over 1,800 people enumerated there. And so the task there would be for Joseph to go through those individual pages and see if he can find Tessie listed with the surname of Jaffa, or perhaps the married surname that she would have taken from her husband. And obviously, as you all know, you can use either Steve Morse or Ancestry or Family Search or MyHeritage or a number of other sources to view those individual census pages. And just to add to that, there were also at the time in 1920, there were 60 women being held at the North Carolina State Prison in Raleigh in 1920. I hope that's not where she was, but there are actually census records for the North Carolina State Prison also, and their enumeration district for that one is 0138. There are over 800 people there at that time, although the vast majority of those were men. And you know, you can also view those at the same place. Now, I think this one qualifies as a legitimate long shot, but there is a list of persons executed in North Carolina. And I checked that one. She's not there, but I provided it for those of us who have murderers and hardened criminals in our family trees. We can perhaps use that at some point in the future. And then there's the North Carolina State Archives. And it turns out that the NC State Archives actually do hold the patient records for Dorothea Dix Hospital. And there are restrictions, obviously, on viewing those, but there's a 100-year time limit that has to expire. And then after that point, then family members are theoretically at least allowed to have access to those. And, you know, so Joseph would, I would think, would qualify. One would have to, you know, go there in person and speak to the archivist and inquire about that. There's also an article that I provided the URL for here at the bottom that provides more detail about the Dorothea Dix patient records. So that's what I could dig up on that.
Jeff, Jordan and Barbara have either a comment or a question. And Debbie Moose wanted to also know, might the state archives have records for Broughton as well?
They do. I did not get the details on that, but they have an awful lot of information there. I think they would have the Broughton records as well.
Okay. Barbara and Jordan, did you want to add to the discussion? Could you unmute, please? We need you to unmute first.
I don't know if you were talking about me. I don't know if there's another Barbara on this.
Yeah, there is another Barbara.
Okay, so it's not me.
Okay,
but-
this is Barbara Miller, but I'm not sure about the dates and all, but could her name have been changed? Could she be adopted? And I know years ago, some children, because families couldn't support them, went to some Jewish organization. I don't remember what they called it, where they were taken care of.
Name change is certainly a possibility. I don't know about adoption for somebody who's already in their 20s and
Oh, I didn't know she was that old. Yeah.
okay.
And Barbara Levy, did you have a question that you wanted to ask or a comment? No. Okay. Those are some pretty good areas to follow up on, Jeff. I don't know how you found it all. I was looking in newspapers.com, a database that I have, and at least in a very quick review, I didn't see anything at all about Tessie, but I think the idea that she might have been institutionalized or in prison, if she just kind of disappears from public view, is a really good idea to follow up on.
So just skip through this. There's just a little bit about the divorce records, which unfortunately don't begin until 1926, so would not have been helpful in this case. Then if there's nothing else on that case, we'll move on to the next one, which is Stan Levine's.
We do have one question from Richard Kramer. Richard, would you unmute?
Yes, I'm just wondering, was there any follow-up on Ethel as opposed to the mother?
It's a good question. I think there is perhaps something more that could be done on Ethel. And if Joseph had been here, I would have asked him, did you already check with the state vital records about seeing if they can track down Ethel's birth certificate? He said he looked and he couldn't find it. I'm not sure if that means he checked the normal websites, the genealogical websites, or if it means he made a vital records inquiry. It's a good question.
I don't see any other hands up.
Here.
Okay.
I wondered if, I know that there were a number of mental institutions that actually took women who had postpartum depression. And so I don't know if her disappearance happened around the same time as her daughter's birth. And so it would be interesting to look at that particular time and see.
It's a great idea.
Sure. Okay.
I have one more question. If he was on his third wife by 1920, has anybody looked at the marriage records to see like when he married his second wife even? Because that would really narrow down the time frame during which she went missing.
Well, that's a good question, Ava. And the person we're talking about in this case is actually the second wife. The first wife passed away.
Oh, okay.
And she's the second wife. And then by 1920, he's on the third wife. And unfortunately, the marriage records, like the divorce records, begin after 1920. So they're not helpful in this case.
Great suggestions, though. Really good theories.
Okay, ready to go on to the next one?
I think so.
Okay, this item was brought forth by Stan Levine, and this is his grandfather, William Wolf Zehev Levine. And sorry, I'm having a little bit of issue in advancing the slide here. Oh, okay, here we go. So Stan's grandfather, William Levine, immigrated about 1893, and Stan has actually done quite a bit of work to identify exactly when he immigrated, and I think he has pinpointed that it was 1893. And he was either from Chomsk, a town in Belarus today, or Treby, Lithuania. And Stan's grandfather's wife, Sarah, and their son, Louis, arrived shortly after William got here. And they settled in Lynchburg, Virginia. There's evidence, there's documentary evidence of them being there by 1897. Difficult to document before that point. Okay, and as I said, Stan has done extensive research. I'm going to show you just how extensive the research is that Stan has done in just a moment. He's not been able to find any passenger manifest or any naturalization records. And this is a problem I think that we all resonate with, because those two particular categories of records are so hard for all of us to find in so many cases. So let's talk a little bit. Before we go there, let's first of all, let's hear what suggestions you guys have for Stan. Does anybody have any suggestions for Stan?
I assume that Stan did the usual Steve Morse search.
Yes.
Okay. I see Barbara, Barbara Levy.
I just wanted to know if, what is it he wants to know about his grandfather, and did he stop having records of him at any point, or what did?
Stan's question is very specific. He wants to find two documents. He wants to find the passenger manifest, and he wants to find his naturalization records.
Well, the one suggestion I might have is that if he left Lithuania, he might have gone to England, and then from England to Canada, and then from Canada taken a train south. I know that because I know that was how my grandfather came, and there were a number of other people who came the same way.
And Debbie Moose adds in chat, is Stan really sure that his grandfather was naturalized? He may never have become a citizen at all.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure of too much about him since he died before I was born.
Okay.
Anyone
else?
else?
If you look at the Canadian records, you can see if he came into areas of Eastern Canada.
And Barbara Silver has an observation also. Barbara, would you unmute yourself? You have to be unmuted, Barbara. Barbara Silver. Still can't hear you. Try again. There we go.
Okay, sorry. I was wondering about the name. I ran into this exact problem with my grandfather, and the name Levine, it's a very common name. My grandfather's name was also very common, Goldstein, and there's reason to believe that he wasn't. In my case, he wasn't really Goldstein when he came into this country, somehow. So it's possible that there may have been another name being used or a derivation of that name.
Yeah, Renee piggybacks on that idea too. She says maybe he traveled under a sponsor's name. which of course would be challenging to figure out. So Geoff, what were you able to figure out?
First of all, I wanted to point out just how thorough Stan's research was. And so I took a look at Stan's tree on Ancestry, and particularly the profile page for his grandfather, William. And I've put a copy of that up here on the screen. As you can see, I had to break it into two parts in order to fit it in here, because the number of sources and references that Stan has obtained for William is vast. Okay, he's got dozens and dozens of different sources of different types that he has found. In fact, I'm going to venture to guess that Stan has included here every relevant document that's available on Ancestry, and several that are from other sources besides Ancestry. And he's done a very comprehensive job. He's gone back and hammered away at it until he's sure he's found everything that can be found. And this is a process that, you know, each of us, when we encounter a brick wall person, this is what you have to do. You have to find every single thing that's possibly related to this person, because you never know when one of these documents is going to provide a clue. And Stan has arguably done a comprehensive job of this. And you can just see how many different places he has investigated. Okay, and not all of them are the ones that you think of. Not all of them are Ancestry or MyHeritage or Family Search. Okay, he's also, one of the places that he's gone and has been a very effective, very helpful source for him is the local library in Lynchburg, where he has obtained some city directories, several of which are listed in the Ancestry profile. And then this is a page from the city directory that I've got up on the screen on the right-hand side now, showing it's a list of businesses in a particular neighborhood of downtown, which lists William Levin Shoes. Okay, that's his grandfather's business. And then he's found a couple of extremely interesting documents involving the synagogue in Lynchburg. And William, it turns out, was a founding member of this synagogue, one of a small group, I want to say 13 people, Stan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, who were founding members of that synagogue. And he's also got a document telling the story of the synagogue, which is very interesting. Okay, so the point here is, non-traditional sources that you don't normally think of, sources that you don't just push a button and get an answer, that call for a little bit of out-of-the-box thinking. Okay, so Stan has done a very comprehensive job of searching, and yet still he hasn't found the information that he's looking for. Okay. So, one of the things I looked at, and I'll just say right up front that I give myself the biggest red X out of all of these on Stan's case, because I think I found the least that was possibly helpful to him on this one. But, the things that I looked at included the 1900 census, because it sticks out like a sore thumb. We know he was here in 1897. Why can't we find this darned 1900 census page? We also know exactly where he was. He was in Lynchburg. Okay, so why can't we find that? It would have potentially been very helpful, and for one thing, it would have confirmed the year in which he immigrated. Okay, and Stan found a number of Lynchburg directories. In fact, he checked all of the Lynchburg directories that existed, and he found several addresses. And I've listed 4 of them here that were, around the time, slightly before or on the year 1900, or in one case, just after 1900. So these are 4 places that we can look to see if we can find this missing census record. And here are the 3 pages that correspond to those 4 addresses. 2 of those addresses are actually on the same census page, and I've shown in red the portion of the census page that pertains to that particular address. And in none of these 3 pages does the name William Levin appear. He is simply not there. Okay, and you know what? There are 2 of these addresses where there's not any resident shown. Okay, and those are those ones in the 300 block of 12th Street. So it appears that he could very well have been there and not been enumerated. Perhaps he was repeatedly not home when the census taker visited.
Jeffrey, do you mind if I interrupt and ask Robert to unmute, because he likes census stuff and he's got his hands up.
No, please. I was just wondering whether someone has searched independently for the wife or the child to see if their records exist independently and whether they would reveal anything about William.
I did, but Stan, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, that was his first wife. She wasn't my grandmother. She gave birth, I think it was 1903, and died a couple months later because of complications. So she died sort of in childbirth, but not when she gave birth.
I see.
As a result, and then 7 more children. We found the grave of the child. We found that the mother was transported to New York to be buried. We haven't found her burial place in New York. Within a year, he married a new woman. He went to Brooklyn, married her in New York City, and brought her back to Lynchburg. This was around 1903, if I remember correctly. And then he had 7 more children, of which my father was one.
But fair to say, Stan, that the wife's name and the son's name did not lead us to the census record for William, right, in 1900.
No, and the son stayed. The son stayed with them for a few years. He's in later censuses. He does appear. He, of course, was the oldest one. And then eventually, from my cousin, who's also done some research, he moved with the family to New York City, to the New York City area, New York City and Brooklyn. And we have lots of records and information about them up there.
Okay, so the other note that I made here was that the Lynchburg directories for 1894 and 1895 and 1896 did not have any listing for William either. And I actually went to the Lynchburg library and checked the local Lynchburg newspaper archives there, which are only available at that library, and could not find any mention of William, or in fact could not find any mention of any Jewish person from that era, which I guess was not that unusual, but it was a little surprising to me. And the other place I looked was the historical maps, because I really wanted to find a map of that neighborhood that he lived in. And I actually have that on the following page, so hold that thought for a minute. The final suggestion I had was to order an index search from the USCIS, and I don't know if you've already done this, Stan, or if you've considered it and discarded that option because of the cost or the length of time that you have to wait, which is considerable.
The cost is no object. I just haven't gotten to that.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's something that, you know, you can, when you get around to it, you can pursue that, and then a couple of years later, you might get a result. Because it is a couple of years now that people are waiting, and I'm sitting on one that's almost a year old that I haven't heard back on yet. And I just put the URL there for a reference. And then, you know, here's the last thing I'll show, which is this copy of this map dated 1891 that includes the neighborhood where William lived. And, you know, that's from the local library there in Lynchburg. And you'll notice that there's some damage to this map from the creases where the map was folded. It's a very large, you know, think, I don't know, 10 feet by 10 feet or so size piece of paper. And it's folded up, and where the folds occur, the map has been damaged. And so take a guess at where William house was located.
Never fails.
Yeah, right under Murphy's Law, right, is where that one's filed. So, okay, so that's what I came up with for Stan. And as I said, not really particularly helpful. I give myself a red X for that one, but maybe we'll do a little better on some of the other ones.
We do have a couple comments. I wouldn't give you a red X on that assignment at all. And Stan, your research is remarkable. Are you absolutely convinced it's Lynchburg, Stan, and not Lunenburg?
No, we know for sure it's in Lynchburg. He actually had some partners there that there was some relationship. They came from the same area in Belarus, and they moved around, and we're trying to trace through some of their relatives. So we definitely know it was in Lynchburg. In fact, my cousin even remembered the address. We went and visited the address. Of course, it was an empty lot, but the house right next to it looked exactly the same. She has pictures from it. So we definitely knew one of those addresses was correct, and she'd been there. And she actually met his son a couple times when they were up in New York. Obviously, she's a little older than me. Now, she's my age, but she was, most of the family was in New York. My father moved to New Jersey, so they had more contact with them up there.
Andrea Shapiro says that older census records from her ancestors do say whether they were aliens or citizens. So you could determine perhaps if in fact your grandfather was naturalized. And Maida says, are there any voter lists available for this location and time? And also rabbinical records. I think the voter records are kind of an interesting idea. That would be relatively easy to find. What do you think, Geoff?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely worth checking.
Yeah. Let's see if there are other comments and questions. Any other? Was somebody raising a question or making an observation? It might be just some feedback that I'm hearing.
A later census did have some dates for his naturalization, but as we know, when the censor came in and asked you questions, he didn't ask for proof. He or she didn't, I guess it was mostly didn't ask for proof of your answers. So when the person gave him in 1910, I think it was 1910 and 1920, when he gave him and said he was naturalized and he gave him a year, there were 2 different years he gave, and he could have lied 2 times. But it implied he was naturalized somewhere.
Mike Holt, I think you're on the line. Mike has given several talks on migration, naturalization related issues. Mike, did you want to add anything to the conversation? Are you on the line with us?
I am on the line. I regrettably have nothing to add.
Okay. All right. And we do have another 2 comments from Debbie Moose that if your grandfather wasn't a citizen, he wouldn't be on any voter rolls. But she also recommends to see if there are any general books about Jewish life in Virginia. Andrea Shapiro adds, what about military records? Maida says, as far as the census goes, the informant could be a neighbor and they sometimes don't know the answers. And also, are there any Army registration cards for his son for World War II?
Yes, there are records for his son for World War II.
Okay. And did those give you any addresses that might be helpful?
No, just Lynchburg. I mean, yeah, we already knew the address, but it was way after that time. Most of the stuff comes from in the 1900s, 1910, 1920.
Okay. All right, let's see if there are any other comments or questions. Okay.
I don't know if you just didn't see my comment, but I commented that I would check the census under Wolf because I have seen instances where the names were reversed, and it can be something as simple as that.
We'll do that.
That's a great idea. Doesn't his middle name also stand Z? I think it was spelled Zehev. I would have spelled it Zev, which I think is a variant for wolf, isn't it?
Yes, it was Zev was a variant for wolf.
Okay, I think Ava's onto something here. You never know. Okay, I think we're ready for the next case, Geoff.
Okay, thanks. So the next case is brought to us by Barbara Miller concerning Bela Goldie Moralovitz. I love this case. I thought this was a really interesting one. And we're talking about Barbara's great-grandmother, and she's buried in a cemetery called Waldheim Cemetery in Chicago. Okay. And her stone shows a death date of the 27th of February, 1931. Okay. No other information about her is available. And I know that's surprising, especially for somebody who died so recently, but it's absolutely true. No other information is readily obtainable. Okay. What suggestions do you guys have for where to start with this really puzzling case? Debbie's raising.
I'd like to chime in if that's okay, since I'm from the Chicago area. I've been to Waldheim. It is a huge Jewish cemetery in Chicago. First thing I would do is call Waldheim, because you'd be surprised what these folks in the cemeteries have in their records about who buried this person, whether the bill was paid, who the pallbearers might have been. So I would definitely call Waldheim. Waldheim is also one of those, they're very good at follow-up, I have found. And of course, once they have your contact information, they're going to ask you to donate some money to take care of the grave if it's in bad shape. So that would be my first suggestion. I bet we have some other people just waiting to comment on this one. Who else has a thought? Barbara Silver, would you unmute?
Hello. So I want to tag on to what you suggested. Also ask the cemetery people, their records, who is buried nearby, because you might get a clue from that as well.
Can I make a comment? Well, when we were there, they were not too helpful in the office, but there were other graves called by Wellers. And I don't know if they were a distant relative or helped in bringing her to America, but there were a family called Wellers, and I did write down some of the birth dates and I guess when they were buried. But maybe now, if I called the cemetery, maybe they would be more helpful.
Yeah, Robert Hill.
I was just wondering if the cemetery has any records at all, if their record may show who the undertaker was. I have found a couple of relatives by going around through the undertaker and the undertaker's records to see who the informant was, who paid their bill, et cetera, to see if there's a connection you can find that way.
Sometimes you can even get an obituary that way, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Who else? There's a suggestion from Renee about Landsmannschaften groups, if you know the community where great grandma came from. And also, have you seen the gravestone itself that might have information about the father's name or some other information that would be helpful? Barbara?
Yes, we have a copy of the gravestone. When we were there, unfortunately, there was a lot of shadow on it, but we might be able to find out what the Jewish letters were standing for.
Okay, Geoff, do you mind if I grab the screen share for a moment? Because I have a pic. I just went to find a grave to find it. May I go ahead and grab the screen for a second?
Yes, please do.
Okay, Can you see the picture on your screen now?
Yes, that's her.
Okay, and here's the gravestone. I don't know if we have anybody here who can read Hebrew. I wish David Sandels were here, but maybe some of you can read what it says here. Let me see if I can blow it up a little bit also. That might be a little bit better. It tells, we can figure out her approximate year of birth for sure.
The first word is Haisha, the woman. The next one is Hatsanoah. I don't know that word. Amgu.
Take a picture of that.
It's another one I don't know.
Or we'll have to go to find a grave.
Akira. But now we get to her name. Nalda Bat. So she's the daughter of a rabbi, Rav Aharon Halevi. So she's the daughter of someone named Aaron Halevi. Aaron Levy.
Rav just it means Mr.
Oh, it could be. But anyway, his name is Aaron Levy.
No, he's,
Or Levitz.
It's Levi, the Levite.
he's the
Yeah,
Levite.
Aaron the Levite. These are initials I can't tell you.
It
That's
looks
all
like
I know.
thank you, Andrea, did really well. See, I'm a high school Hebrew school dropout, so I'm useless, but I know what these candlesticks mean. It means that she was an observant Jew.
Yes,
Anybody else? Can anybody else help us with the translation? Refine it a bit more?
her name was Bela Golda.
Golda, yeah.
Mhm.
But you think there would be some record who she lived with or when she came to America?
Mhm.
That's what I can't find.
Okay, well, let's see what else Geoff has for you. Geoff, go ahead and take the screen back. Yeah, there we go. You should be able to see Geoff's screen again.
Okay, so here's what I wanted to say about this case. First of all, confirming that the information is fairly scanty. I did note that there is a private tree owned by a person named Heidi Andrikis, which is on MyHeritage, and there may be some information that Heidi would be willing to share. It might be worth contacting her. The strategy I wanted to recommend was to focus on her two sons who were named Hyman and Harry Moralovitz, and they reportedly came to the US from Kaunas, Lithuania, or that vicinity anyway, and to collect known addresses for Hyman and Harry and their families. And in particular, there are naturalization papers available both in Ancestry and Family Search, I suppose other places as well, for three family members that I found, and which give addresses as well as information about the town of origin. And there's also 1940 census records in Chicago in both places. And there are also World War I and World War II draft registration cards that are, available from Fold Ancestry and also from Family Search. The World War I card, and I believe it was for Harry actually, provided the name of the particular town, the small town, which is close to Kaunas, but not actually Kaunas. And so I thought that was of interest. And then there are historical Chicago directories, and these are available. One place is in Fold. I think there are probably other sources available too. And make sure to check those, because there are a lot of listings for Hyman and Harry and family members, and those provide important clues, including addresses that the family lived at. And you can use those addresses to find some of the census records for prior years, some of which were not properly indexed. Okay, and so they're not going to come up. Some of them will come up in an ancestry search, for example, but others of them will not. But you can still locate those by first finding the address in the Chicago directory and then using Steve Morse to identify the enumeration district for that address, and then from there viewing the census pages for each of those EDs and hunting down the people that lived at that particular address. And you will find, if you go through that process, you will find some census records for family members. And, you know, I'm just going to cite the best practice here, which is find every census record for every descendant, or else prove that that census record doesn't exist. This is a tedious process to go through. But if you're dealing with a brick wall situation where you cannot find the information you're looking for, it's just one of those steps that it behooves each of us to follow through with, to, you know, make sure that there aren't any unrecorded census records that are lingering out there, you know, perhaps misindexed, or you know, they're not coming up through the normal way of searching. It's also possible that the family lived somewhere else before they came to Chicago. And so, you know, in particular, in this case, there are multiple naturalization papers showing arrivals in New York and Philadelphia. And so they weren't always living in Chicago. We should check and see if perhaps they lived in New York or Philadelphia before they came to Chicago.
And Geoff, we have a new member from Chicago on the line. She'll tell you there's a very well-organized JGS out of Northbrook, the Illinois JGS, and they've got a lot of people there who are experts on Jews in the Chicago area. Maida pointed out that there are other Merrill Levitzes buried in Waldheim, including Harry and a Sarah. So that's two more, and Harry is probably the son.
Yes, Sarah is the daughter. There were 3 daughters and 2 sons.
Okay, I would give Waldheim a call. They've gotten a lot of business from the Merrill Levitz family. They might have some really great information. Debbie Moose also said since Bela was an observant Jew, she probably attended a synagogue in the Chicago area. And again, the Illinois JGS might be able to give you some leads about that. And there were also Yiskor records that might have been issued. That's a note from Renee.
Can you repeat the organization, Illinois what?
Illinois Jewish Genealogical Society. I will put a Google link. I'll put a link in the chat for you in just a moment. One of our members said that if you go to the Facebook group called Jewish Genealogy Portal, if you're on Facebook, just search Jewish Genealogy Portal and then do a further search for Waldheim. Apparently there's someone by the name of Abby Schmeling writing a book about Waldheim. Let's see, I'll get that Illinois JGS information for you. Let me ask Maida. Maida, do you want to unmute and add any other suggestions about searching for the Merrill Levitz family of Chicago?
Well, there seem to be other Merrill Levitzes around here. I found a Sally Merrill Levitz, 1928 to 2014, is buried at Sunset Memorial Lawns. And it seems like a fairly uncommon name. That should be a cousin of yours who has living children right now.
What?
Okay, that she's got possibly living relatives. The Merrill Levitz family, I've heard that name before in the Chicago area. I'm adding the URL for the Jewish Genealogical Society of Illinois to the chat in just a minute, and they do have a database on their website of records in Chicago, or in Illinois anyway, mostly Chicago. There you go. It's in the chat.
Oh, okay. I'll open it up for you from the chat.
And it's a very active group. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
Pretty neat.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your help. It was very disappointing at the cemetery, a lot of stones were destroyed or broken or bent. It's just a shame they didn't keep it up there.
Yeah, that's why once they get your name, Barbara, they're going to be asking you for donations. A lot of cemeteries are in trouble that way. Yeah, Debbie Moose said that she liked my advice about always contacting a JGS. I was just trying to think for Stan if there's a JGS in Virginia, but Stan, if you go to the IAJGS website, you can see who all of the member societies are. I've had incredible good luck contacting even out of country JGSs. A new Brazil chapter helped me find a cousin in Brazil. So you never know what you might find.
Here it is, Barbara, right there.
Okay. Barbara, I'm going to go ahead and you folks, since you're going ahead and looking for stuff, who else has some other suggestions about finding Bela?
Anyone?
Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
Herb, go ahead.
Yeah, just one out of the left field comment is that many times in subsequent generations, the Jews would shorten the names, and Merelevitz may have become Levitz, which was a very common Jewish name in some relatives down the line. So it may be fruitful to look if you're looking for other relatives. For example, in My Heritage, if you're there, search under Levitz as well as Merelevitz, you may find some other relatives who changed the name in that way. Just a suggestion.
What a great bunch of suggestions.
Yeah. I can see just by Googling, quite a few people by the last name of Merelevitz live in Chicago. I call every single one of them. You never know. Okay. Thank you, Herb.
Okay, we'll move ahead to the next case then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And my final suggestion on this one was, if you haven't already done so, put a public tree up at Ancestry or My Heritage, and then other people will find you, and that can be a helpful source as well. Okay, so our next case is brought to us by Sue Feldblum, and her relative is Esther Vinocur Siegel, and this is her maternal grandmother, born in 1887. And Esther's parents were Yaakov Josef Vinocur and Chayasura Greenstein. And sorry about the pronunciation. Esther came to the US about 1903 and aged about 16. And she married a man named Louis Siegel and had 3 children. And they lived, as Sue discovered, in 1915. Sue obtained the New York State Census for that year, and they lived on East 21st Street in New York. Okay, later they lived in Brooklyn, and Esther died in 1971. So where was Esther born? Sue has been looking for 30 years. And so she cannot find the passenger manifest in particular, and Esther was naturalized under her husband's papers, so that particular avenue is not helpful. Okay, so what suggestions do we have for Sue?
I'd like to know if, and this is probably obvious, did Sue go to Jewish Gen?
Yes.
Okay, and did you looked under the name Vinocur? Because that's an
Vinocur
unusual.
and Greenstein, because the family changed the name from Vinocur to Greenstein. I'm frozen here. You won't be able to see me, but I can talk. Most of the family changed the name to Greenstein. In fact, my great-grandfather was known as Joe Greenstein. And that's how I found him on the 1915 census, living with one of his sons. So I went on, I looked up Vinocur, I looked up Greenstein, nothing. I don't know where to look. Help.
But her birth name was Vinocur.
Yes.
Okay. So right now I'm looking at the Avutenu surname list to see where records might be held from that name. And I'm thinking it was probably spelled with a W. But pronounced.
I don't know. They always spelled it with the V.
They did spell with a V.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm looking for that. I see, Geoff, that there are some comments about, I assume this is Debbie Moosey asking, I assume there was no help with the census, and Renee is also saying if she was religious, did you look at the mother's surname? So let's see what other suggestions are here.
Yeah, hold that thought about the census because I'm going to go back.
Okay, all right. Well, while you're doing that, I'm going to go and see if I can find something in the surname index that tells us about the origin of that name.
Before we go there, did anyone else have any suggestions they want to offer? Okay, well, let's move ahead and take a look at my response. And, one of my suggestions that may sound a bit like a broken record, but start with the more recent relatives and work backward in time. And that can frequently be helpful. And in this case, we have a family where both the targeted person, Esther in this case, and her husband, they both had multiple siblings, okay? And those siblings immigrated and they were in New York, okay? So make sure that your public tree includes all the descendants, and use all of the sources, all the usual suspects to make sure you've collected everything. I know I said that before, but it's worth repeating. And, I also said earlier about using city directories and using Steve Morse to find the census records, particularly worthwhile suggestion in this case. The city directories for New York City are available among many places, but in particular at Internet Archive. If you want a place that's very readily accessible on the internet, that would be the one. And you will find multiple directory listings for family members, and those directory listings provide addresses. Those addresses can be used to get census records, and they are out there, okay? I didn't actually give them to you, but you can discover those, okay? I'll let you have the pleasure of finding those yourself. And you also, adding more relatives to your public tree can lead to more cousins who may have information to share. In particular, you've got a cousin who seems to be extremely certain that Esther and all her brothers were born in this little town of Lutsk in the province of Volyn in Ukraine. And you mentioned that you may not trust his work, but I still think that it might be worth asking him the question, what documentation does he have that makes him so certain that that's the town? He might have something that he's willing to share. Then again, he might tell you to pound sand, but it costs nothing to ask.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have anything to add before we go on to the next case?
There's Debbie said there was a TV journalist by the name of Sandra Vinocur, and Vinocur might be a derivative of that name. Just something to think about. And Renee pointed out that the town of Lutsk has a Yiskor book on Jewish gen, and if there's a Yiskor book, there's probably a necrology, a list of people who died in the war. So that's a really good lead. Geoff, can I share my screen again? Do you mind?
Yes, please.
Okay. I don't know how many of you are aware of this resource. Avutenu is the international periodical of Jewish genealogy. And when you go to its website, they have what the publisher, Gary Malkatov, calls a Soundex search result. So I typed in the name Vinocur because I know that I've seen it with a W, and apparently there are hundreds of variations on that name. But because Sue said, no, it was spelled as Vinocur, I thought, well, let's just go ahead and look at the name Vinocur right here. Can you see where I'm pointing?
Yep.
And you'll notice to the right, it says BDJKRU. That responds to the databases where the name Vinocur appears. So B, for example, the name Vinocur appears in the All Poland database. It appears in Jewish Gen Family Finder, that's letter J. So you might want to go to these various resources where the name Vinocur appears and see, you know, if you get lucky. I went to Jewish Gen and typed in, just following up on this theory that maybe the family is Ukrainian in origin. I did see a lot of Vinocurs who are, I mean, that name is just, it's unfortunately quite common. As you can see, I'm scrolling here, it appears in Bessarabia. It appears in Lithuania, but assuming that that cousin is right and it's a Ukrainian name as well, then there are 103 records here we can click on, and I'll just go ahead and do that, birth records. And there's a Hava Vinocur from the town of Bishev. And, you know, is that close to Lutsk? I don't know, but looks like it's close to Kyiv. But at any rate, there are a number of records here. Here's a Hana, here's a Haya Rivka Vinocur. So again, lots of, almost too many leads, but I would do this, I would do what Jeffrey's saying, when you're stuck, you look at everything.
Okay.
That Hana Vinocur listing there, I think that town is very close.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay. So there you go. And do you know how to find the Yiskor book on Jewish Gen?
No. But
Okay. All right. Well, let me go back. Let me steal the show again for just a second. Let's go back to Jewish Gen. And if you go to the databases tab and go to Town Finder.
Right.
Okay. And now again, we're taking a leap of faith here that that cousin might be right. I'm going to type in Lutsk. And yes, okay, it was 228 miles west of Kiev, and it looks like there are 428 people who are in Jewish Gen Family Finder looking for people from this town. So again, that would be, you might want to take a look and see if any of these names mean anything to you in terms of your search. And then for the Yisker book, let's see, here we go. We go to research and go to Yiskor books. And I believe there is some place where we can search which Yiskor books
Right
are
there.
available.
It was right there in that list that Lutz.
It was it?
Yes.
Oh, there it is. Okay, so I can just click on that link maybe. Okay, there you go. Actually, this isn't a Yiskor book, it's a Sefer, I think. No, they're calling it a memorial book. So let's take a look and see if anything at all has been translated. If it has been, it would be, yeah, here are a couple of articles that have already been translated.
What's a Sefer?
Pardon me?
What's a Sefer?
A Sefer is a diary of a town, and it was passed from person to person to be in charge of. They kind of kept a little record or a diary of the town.
A sefer in Hebrew means book.
Okay. It's a special kind of book, though, for a Jewish community, and it isn't. Yiskor books are specifically memorial books for about the people who died during the Holocaust. I'm scrolling. Looks like it was a very significant Yiskor book, but let me go down here to the very end. Sorry to make you seasick. I'm looking for the necrology. And It doesn't seem to have one, or it doesn't have one that's translated. But you can get this, you might be able to get this book on the New York from the New York Public Library. They have digitized a lot of them and have them available. That also search on this page for the name you're interested in, or the names. Let's also see if there is a Kahila page for the town. What do you think, folks? Like, it would be in Ukraine, I guess. And let's see if there is a Kahila page for Lusk as well. Again, I'm taking a flying leap here, assuming that that town is significant to your family. I don't see a Kahila page, at least not yet.
Wait.
Okay, Renee.
There it is.
Yeah, there it
There
is.
it is.
You do see it?
Yep.
Ah, there it
Yes,
is.
ma'am.
Thank you. Good thing. See, this is why I need editors.
Debbie, I just had one comment about the Yisker book. May I?
Yes.
So I've spent hours going down rabbit holes with Yisker books, but when you, in the absence of records, especially because depending on the town, a lot of records were burned, in the Ukraine, and I don't even want to think about what's going on now. But in reading the Yisker books, they're beyond the necrology listings, the rabbis or the important people who were involved with food, clothing, orphans, the Chevra Kadisha, they actually tell these amazing stories pre-Shoah of the important people in the town, or the good people. And so I'm at a loss. I have a brick wall. I'll have to have another session maybe with this group about that. But the Halbergs, my brother and I are trying so hard, but we found mention of the Halbergs, and I was thrilled. Beyond 1860 in a Yisker book. It took me 3 hours, but I was so excited. So it is about
this. This is why it's important to give donations to get these books translated. You're absolutely right, Renee. The necrologies are usually translated first because that's an easy way to find if you had a family member in that town, but it's the rest of the Yisker book that gives you the background. You're absolutely right. But there is a Kahila page here, and a Kahila page is, Mike has a couple of them, I have a couple of them. We've basically created these virtual towns, and often there's some information here or other links that might help you find information. Once you can confirm that Lutsk is your town, again, take a look up here. You have famous Lutzkites, images, history. So see if there's something here that's promising as well. And yes, I can't emphasize what Renee is saying enough, and the importance of donating to get these Yisker books translated and to create these websites for these towns to help other people. Okay. Let's see who else has a hand up to help out. Geoff, I do so much like your methodology, the way you think about these problems. Do you map out where you should be looking, or do you just go, I'm going to try here and then I'm going to try there? Do you actually have a list?
I don't have a list.
Okay. I was wondering how organized you really are. Okay. Take it away.
Okay. Okay. So we're going on to the next case, which is Morris Zelig Katz, brought to us by Barbara Levy. And Morris was Barbara's maternal grandfather. Okay. He's born in 1878 in Riga, Latvia. And her parents' names were Israel and Sarah. Okay. They lived in Finland at some point before coming to the US. And this is, I think this problem was encountered earlier on another case. Here's another person whose surname was changed, okay, before coming to the US or around the time of coming to the US, which makes it tremendously difficult for us. And, compounding the problem here, we all know just how common the Katz surname is. It couldn't be more difficult, okay? And Morris died in 1968 in Worcester, Massachusetts, which turns out to be an important town in this story. Okay, and Barbara would like to know, where was Morris born? Was it Latvia, in fact, or was it in Finland? And where did he live during the time that he was in Finland? And how long was he there? And why did he leave Latvia? And why did he come back to Latvia before coming to the US? Was their surname really Katz or something else? What was it? Okay, and gee, what the heck can we say about his parent, or her parents? His parents, Israel and Sarah, and their families. Okay, so what suggestions can we offer for Barbara?
Wow, Jews in Finland. It sounds like a Mel Brooks movie.
There actually were quite a few Jews in Finland. There were, it's because it was a Russian territory, and there were Russian military schools that were in Finland, and they used to take the Jewish children around the age of 12 before they were bar mitzvahed and put them in these schools and they would be there for someplace around 20 years in order to try to get them to convert, to get them to forget about their backgrounds. Some families moved with their child to that place, to Finland. And there were a number of towns around in Finland where there were Jewish families. Finland allowed Jews to live in 3 or 4 cities, and that was it.
Barbara, I have to ask you, did you know this before you started your research?
No, I did a great deal of research on Finland, and there is I guess it's a genealogy survey portal called Amities, and in it, the woman who made it, she puts there are a whole bunch of Jewish names, and you can see where they were born, and so forth. In my case, I couldn't find these people, but I did find some other people of the same names or similar names, and I could try to contact them to limited success.
Barbara, Ava wants to know if you contacted the Latvian archives, and would they perhaps have passport information?
I haven't contacted the Latvian archives because it's difficult for me because I don't speak Russian. Or Latvian, whatever. I think it was Russian at the time. But my grandfather says that he didn't have a passport. He came to the United States via, actually, the way he said it is that he stowed away on the boat.
Okay, and so you haven't contacted either the Latvian or the Finnish archives?
No, I haven't.
Either one. And Debbie Moose says because maybe there was a book written about those schools and their history.
Yes, actually, there's quite a bit about the schools, but I haven't found anything that has actual names of, the whole names of people.
You can write to you can email the Latvian archives in English, and they have people there who will speak English and can respond to you in English.
Oh, great. That would be great.
That's a great suggestion.
Yeah, that is great.
Maida says maybe this is obvious, but have you checked the death certificates, the obituaries, the Social Security applications for birth information?
I looked at all of them, and I looked at all of the census records. The problem is that Russia owns a lot of countries around the time. So when, in the 1910 census, let's say, my grandfather would say he was from Russia, Latvia. And then in the next census, he would say he was from Russia. And the next census, he would say he was from Finland. The next census. So every 10 years, it got to be something else. And it was because Russia had it belonged to Russia at different times.
Okay. Andrea's got a good idea. There's a Jewish community in Finland now. Have you attempted to contact the synagogues there or anybody in the community?
No, I have just the people who have been, who are on the Amity's list. And a lot of them are still there, but I haven't contacted those people. No, I haven't.
You might want to, there probably at least one Jewish synagogue in the capital.
Yeah, there's a-
And as was pointed out to you by Ava, most of the people in the Scandinavian area, I know Finland isn't strictly Scandinavian, but they all speak English. So I don't think you should fear that you wouldn't be understood. And Debbie Moose adds you should check with the synagogue in Worcester also.
I know all the information about Worcester because I lived there myself.
Okay.
Yeah, and I knew my grandfather and I went to synagogue with him and so forth.
Okay. Who else has some ideas? Yeah, these names are tough. and you don't even have anything easy to help you with a first name. You've got Israel and Sarah. I mean, that makes it really challenging.
Israel and Sarah are really difficult. And one of the things I've tried is that I have done my DNA, and I've done my DNA both on, I did it on Ancestry and I transferred it to MyHeritage. And then I also did my mother's DNA. So that limited the results of that DNA test was limited to her parents, right? Whereas mine had her parents and my father's parents. Hers only had her parents. And in her DNA, I looked for the name Katz, and I looked for people who were who live now in Finland and Sweden and all that area. And I found a couple of people who seemed like they might be related to Israel Katz. It's not clear how. I've written to her. I hope she writes me back, but yeah.
Okay. Well, it looks like there is a Jewish, there's a Helsinki Jewish community, and there's a Chabad for Finland. And I talked to those folks.
Great.
See if they've got some ideas for you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I don't think that were you able to find anything?
Those were much better suggestions than I came up with, but I'll show you what I had. Barbara, I think I'm making the same point that you just made a minute ago about the records, the census records in particular, and where they say the birthplace or the point of origin was. And as you pointed out, 1910 census says Russia, 1920 census also says Russia, 1930 census says Latvia. The World War II draft card says Riga, Latvia, and only the 1940 census states Finland. So, to me, that evidence is stacked in favor of Latvia, but not conclusive. And then you have MyHeritage, where we find this relation named Natalie Scholar, and Barbara, you probably already know who this is, but I'm calling it out just in case. And Natalie states fairly with a degree of certainty that I'm not sure is warranted. She states Morris was born in Finland and that the family moved, and she names the town in Finland somewhat definitively, from there to Riga. And she also gives a date of arrival in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada.
Excuse me, but Natalie got that information from me.
Oh, okay. So this is no help. Okay.
No.
Okay. We'll skip past that then. I'm repeating my suggestion about doing the research on the relatives and the siblings and making your tree public, which I've all said before, and pointing out the naturalization dates between 1920 and 1930 as per the census records, and suggesting an index search for the naturalization records from the USCIS. And the cost associated with that, which is not inconsequential, and the length of time that you have to wait, but still, it would certainly be helpful to have those records.
Jeffrey, don't you think maybe Canada has some information too, since Morris came in through New Brunswick?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, I would check with the Canadian archives. I bet he had to file some papers to get into Canada. It looks like Robert has something to add here too.
I was just going to say, I can't remember the dates exactly, but there was a period when Latvia was actually independent. Before, I can't remember the dates, but so that being tied solely to looking in Russia or in Russian related records may not be entirely fruitful. There may be some kind of independent Latvian records which we don't customarily go to.
Thank you. Ava also wanted to know, Barbara, if your mother has her parents' ketubah.
No, she doesn't. I'm really sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there might have been some information there. And again, just to repeat the obvious, I assume you tried Jewish Gen.
Oh yes, I've made contributions to Jewish Gen all the time, and I use it every day.
Okay. So all the little databases and the Jewish Family Finder, you've tried all of those things as well.
Every single one.
Okay.
And I've put myself on the Family Finder, so if somebody finds something, they can contact me.
And have you communicated with Canada?
No, I haven't, and that would be a really good thing to try.
Yeah. I mean, we always think of Jews coming through Ellis Island, but that's certainly not the only place how Jews arrived here. I think it sounds like you've got a couple of good things to follow up on here.
I think my grandfather came in 1902, and I don't know if he was correct in what he said about where he came, but at least in general, I think it was true that he actually came from. He went from, I think, Riga or someplace near Riga to England. And that's an interesting thing to try, is to look at the English ship records and see if they have any manifests.
Mm-hmm. And Barbara, I think you're right to point out that, Riga is a huge city. And like I say, I'm from Chicago, but I'm really from the suburbs. It's quite possible she came from a town or a village or city outside of Riga. That's just the biggest place. Debbie Moose said, did you ever Google the names? Just Google the names, and with the combination of maybe plus Latvia or plus Finland, because Google, I know Barbara Friedman, our president, is a real big fan of just plain old Googling things.
That would be really interesting. I should try that.
You never know.
The other thing that was interesting to me is that I've been trying to find which name which name Katz was changed from, and I know that his Katz wasn't. He couldn't use the Katz. It wasn't a Kohen Katz. In other words, he would not be called up to do the Torah reading first, because his Katz was not a kosher Katz, essentially. and so it was interesting because I tried to find a name that maybe Katz with a C or CATS or something like that, which was less like the Kohen Katz that we saw, which wasn't very helpful. Also, I've been trying to find out, there was a certain level of people whose name was Katzenellenbogen, and they are very well known, very prominent Jewish people. And we were related to Katzenellenbogens, but way, way back. So I can't find any other sort of indication, maybe Katzen, maybe Katz, maybe Katzenkagen, who knows?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm related to Katzenellenbogen from way back too. I'm going to put into chat a URL for Canadian immigration records, and hope that that might be a fruitful research opportunity for you as well.
Great.
Okay. Who else has some suggestions? I love these exotic cases, don't you, Geoff?
Absolutely. Really interesting one.
Yeah. Even though the names are not exotic, the timeline and the places here are absolutely fascinating. I love that little bit of history too that Barbara shared with us about how Jewish families followed their kids when they had to go to these military schools in Finland. Okay, anybody else? I don't see any other hands up. A lot of comments here about other colleagues here, Barbara, struggling with the same kinds of things. Debbie Moose says, maybe Katz is related to Vats and maybe your family and her family are related somehow. It's happened before in our group. We have had cousins find each other. Okay, Geoff.
Okay, pushing ahead. We have one more case to talk about, and this one is, in fact, Rob Fatz's case, which is for Ida Guterman Wager or Wager. Okay, and Rob is asking a very specific question. What name should we use to search for information about my great-grandmother, Ida? Okay, she was born in 1852 in Latvia to Israel Guterman. Mother is unknown. Ida married a man named Gershon or Gilbert Wager or Wager. I'm not sure if I have the correct pronunciation there, on some unknown date. Okay, they had several children. The first named Eli, born in 1873. The last named Bessie, born in 1896. So you can see spread across 23-year period, and all in Latvia. Okay, and Rob has found the 1897 All Russia Census listing Ida with the name Haja Vikna Guterman. Okay, and husband Gershon died in Latvia in 1904. Okay, and daughter Bessie's 1914 wedding notice states that her mother was Ida Wager. Okay, so we have in 1914 Ida living in Randleman, North Carolina. Okay, and she died in 1914, later that same year in High Point, North Carolina, nearby. And the death certificate again shows the name Ida Wager. Okay, and Rob would like to find immigration records for Ida. Okay, and also records in Latvia and Russia. And once again, his specific focus of this question is about what name to use in his search. Okay, so what suggestions do you have for Rob about what name to use?
I think we're actually asking Debbie, aren't we? Because I don't think Rob is online.
If I may just say, this would be, I found all of this. He's not exactly. I found most of this. I also need to take credit for that.
Okay.
And she's got different names all over the place.
Deb, are you sure that all these people are the same people? That Haya and Ida Wager in Randleman is the same person? Are you absolutely sure?
Once she's over here in this country, I'm pretty sure.
Because Haya and Ida, I mean, I can hear the sound, the name, it's similar, but I'm just wondering about that transformation. And what was she doing in Randleman and then High Point?
Well, that's a good question because I can't find any immigration records. And I think in some of the information we sent, someplace I found her name is Victoria Goodman. And there's just a lot of conflict about the name. And we're totally stuck on anything outside of the country. And we can't, I've tried everywhere to try to find a immigration record. Rob's theory is she came over on a submarine.
Okay. Well, I'm going to do a little Googling here while others chime in. I think other people are doing the same thing I'm doing. They're trying to look at different sources here. Just a second.
Again, the Latvian archives probably would have some information on her emigration.
The thing is being a little more certain about the name.
Well, you know her father's name. Is that pretty definite?
Best as I can tell.
And you know her husband's name?
Yeah, I mean, that's definite. The husband's name is definite.
Well, then they would probably be able to find a marriage record for her, not to mention a birth record.
Well, now my understanding is sometimes when Latvia was part of Russia, wasn't there a period of time where Russia did not recognize Jewish marriages and they wouldn't have logged them? Is this during that period of time?
I have never heard of that, and
Okay.
I have gotten quite a bit of information on my family from the Latvian archives, my husband's family.
Okay. I admit I'm not the most adept at using Jewish gen, so there may be some things on there that I've just not been able to find.
Geoff, can I grab the screen?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
just for a moment. Debbie, can you see this obituary?
I've seen that.
Okay, so that hooks up with your information about, it looks like there was a Max Wagger also, and an ID Wagger, a Robert Wagger, and an Mrs. A. Bernard.
Yes, those were, I can't remember if those were her, siblings or other children, but yeah, I already had this. Yeah.
Okay. Forgive my stereotyping, but I just don't think of those communities as being particularly Jewish around the 1900s. It's just an odd place for her to be.
It does seem strange, but Randleman and High Point are not too far from Greensboro. And there was a rather large Jewish community in Greensboro. So I was kind of thinking maybe that was it. That's just an assumption on my part.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, I think I found some other newspaper listings showing the family was in the retail clothing business, I want to say.
There are a lot of Jews in small towns in North Carolina at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because Rob's father was in Kinston, of all places. You know, the whole Jewish peddler, the whole history of that going, into small towns.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've seen the obituaries.
That one, yeah, I've seen.
Okay, all right, yeah, I was just looking to see if there was anything else that was there. Who else has some suggestions about this? Geoff, could you put your information back up on the screen again?
Sure.
So I'm going to check that Abuteno surname index again. Did you have some ideas for her search, Geoff?
I did, but I think we've heard much better ones from the club in the last few minutes.
Somebody has their hand up, Renee.
The only thing, my brother and I recovered half of my paternal grandmother's family just with this was Ukraine though, Debbie. It was because depending on the little shtetl they lived in, civil marriages for Jews were verboten. So they would only have a religious ceremony and you'd be lucky if it got recorded in whatever language.
That's what I was saying. That's what I meant, yeah.
And we didn't know that in the Hallbergs, and my maternal grandmother's paternal was Holtzel or Heltzel. So we kept looking, knowing what happened. She had 8 siblings and we couldn't find anything, in the Yad Vashem records. So we we've somehow, through like hours of research on Jewish Gen, we realized Pollock was a surname we knew nothing of. And then we were able to trace this whole part of our family with a very specific spelling. So I really think looking at the maternal surnames might be important. And then the only other thing I've also experienced in our research is we had another relative from my mom's father's side who was brought over on a, I don't know, I guess, yeah, boat, not a submarine. I love that joke, but she was somebody's servant. And so she was traveling under this sponsoring family's name. And my second cousin, who's lives in New York and is in her 70s, didn't know how anything about her grandmother because we couldn't find her name in the census. And then my brother did a whole other search under the sponsoring family's name and the household, and we were very lucky. So those are the things we encountered on this, on the United States, but in Europe,
So
it's
you,
all,
so you searched under the sponsoring family's name?
we tried it. It's really quirky. And the other thing that I noticed, and I don't know if anyone else in the group follows either Tracing the Tribe,
I do.
Jewish Genealogy Portal, and then there's the one with, isn't Jennifer Mendelsohn the Jewish DNA group? Somebody disclosed it. It's got to be a rarity, but there was a year in the census way back where this worker literally made up, fabricated. He didn't, it was bad weather, it was winter, and he just eliminated neighborhoods and names. And I thought, oh my God, you know, there goes, but it was shared on one of these websites. I don't remember. But in any event, we have had success reviewing, if you know them, the maternal surnames.
Well, we know, we don't know some of them, and we don't know how she immigrated. We can't find immigration records, so unless hopefully someone else had a better luck than we've had.
The good news is that the Wagerman or Wagerman name is a fairly rare name. As a matter of fact, the only way I see it spelled with a W is with one G. So it looks like Wager Man. And I did find 2 people who are searching for that name in the Jewish Family Finder on Jewish Gen. And they do provide their email addresses. So you might want to get in touch with those researchers. Although again, I'm not sure, you know, Wagerman is the right name, the right name to be looking for. Not sure about that, but that would be a shorter search. I'm going to check Guterman now.
I have one other thing to add when somebody, if I can.
Go ahead.
My brother and I ended up, because it's not, you know, we don't know what records are still stuffed in archives, you know, yellowed and aging in dank basements. And I know certainly like in Kev and Lvov, people are trying to save those records and get them out or get them away. But my brother and I hired somebody in Poland, and I presume the same thing could be done for, you know, Latvia, just somebody from the university or from one of these genealogy groups, Debbie, because she's been very helpful. She actually has gone to the archives for us, and she's very reasonable, I think. And she's been finding things that we could not find on Jewish Gen. That's the other thing. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of, I'll put in another plug for donating to the Jewish Gen, you know, Gesher, Galicia, all these different SIG groups, because it is expensive. And now there's a war, you know, to translate all these records in terms of people's time. And occasionally Israelis come over and, you know, do things with cemeteries, and like under Marla Rauscher Osborne, I'm sure some of you know about her. So that's how we have found, those are the more, I don't know if they're esoteric ways, but they're not, you know, they're not the conventional ways. They're more like the rabbit hole ways of finding information.
More traditional way of digging than being able to push some buttons and do some searches.
Well, Jeff,
Okay.
what do you have to say about that, Jeff?
Yeah, I think my ideas kind of, some of them have already been covered. Going back to Rob's first question, what name should I search under, which I think is a very relevant question. I went back to the genealogical proof standard, which talks about a reasonably exhaustive search. And part of reasonably exhaustive is searching under all the possible names the person may have used. And so relevant questions here would be, what names were in use for the person at this particular time, at the time of immigration in particular? Okay, and what names were used in other records, reports, oral histories? Collect them all. What variations or misspellings were likely to have occurred? And in this case, since Ida was already married and apparently widowed, the most likely surname that was used at immigration would have been Wager or Vager or its variations, and some of those have already been called out. And Debbie, I think, was talking about those a moment ago. And also, the need to search under the maiden name has already been discussed as well. And once again, make sure that your tree includes all the siblings and descendants and, out there publicly. And I believe yours is, Debbie. And with respect to the immigration records in particular, first find the 1910 and 1920 census records for Ida. They're out there, and listed in Thomasville in 1910. A nearby town, but not precisely the place that she was living before, and also her children, and they show the year of immigration. Importantly, you already have the naturalization papers for the sons Max and Israel, and those show the date of arrival, and in the case of Max, the actual name of the ship. Look at Steve Morse for the passenger manifest using those arrival dates. Also, there's a 1905 manifest out there for Eli's wife, Riva or Rivka, and their children, and also a 1922 manifest for the same family who presumably went back and came again. Okay, so make sure that you find those if you don't already have them. Also, this small town of Dvinsk, which is now known as Daugavpils, and I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it correctly, in Latvia. And you can use that as a search term on Steve Morse to find other people from that town. Sometimes that can lead to versions of the surname which were misspelled or misindexed, and you might find relatives that way. Also try all the other search engines, Ancestry, MyHeritage, and Family Search in particular, because each one of those has their own index. And so where one site may index the family name one way, another site may index it differently, and it may come up on another site where it didn't come up the first place you checked. And there's also out there, I noticed an important Social Security record that didn't appear to be in your tree for Eli, providing the birthplace as well as the parents' names, and that might be helpful. With respect to Latvian and Russian records, something that Rob also asked about, and someone else mentioned Jewish Gen, there are some promising possible birth and death records for the Vager with a V surname in that small little town of Dvinsk. And also there's a Jewish Gen locality page for this town with links to some other resources. There are, in fact, births, marriages, and deaths records in that town that are available on Family Search. And some of the year, they're not comprehensive, okay, but they do have some of the years that would potentially be important. Eli was born in 1873, and 1873 is one of the years that's there. There's also 1887, which is the year that Robert was born, and there's 1890, which is the year Israel was born. I did not actually read all of those records and see if those particular individuals are shown in the birth records, but it would be worth, either looking yourself or hiring somebody to look if you prefer.
Those were on Family Search?
Yes, they are.
Okay, I've never had much luck on Family Search, so I must not be doing something right.
Well, I'm not going to say it's easy, okay? And there are also 1871 marriages, which is a possible year for the marriage to have occurred. The records are very difficult to read, and it would take considerable effort, frankly, because we're not even dealing with the Arabic alphabet here. We're dealing with the Cyrillic alphabet, and the languages are an additional barrier on top of that. If you want to invest the effort in doing that, there are some books. There's a book called Following the Paper Trail by Shea and Hoffman. There are other books by other authors that provide similar information. I happen to like this one called Following the Paper Trail. It gives illustrations and specific examples that you can use if you want to try to read these records yourself. It's hard and tedious. If it were me, I would probably hire a professional in this case.
We've wanted to do that, but we don't have any good resources I haven't found a lot of good information about how to do that. Hire a professional. And don't tell me go to Jewish Gym, because they're no help.
I did find some, go ahead.
The Latvian Archives has people who can speak English. If you send them an email, if you can find the records on Family Search, they're going to have them in the Latvian Archives, and they'll translate them for you.
Okay, great.
They will charge you for it.
Yeah, I'd expect to, yeah.
And it will take them months, but they will do it.
That's a great suggestion. I bet they do a better job there than any researcher would do. Yes.
Geoff, I'm so glad that you mentioned Family Search because up until this point, no one had. May I share the screen again?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Let me go back to, here we go, Family Search. I'm on my Family Search site. Debbie, can you see it? Can everyone see?
Yeah.
All right. One of the things you want to do is head over here to the tab that says Search. And if you're not familiar with the site, you probably want to go through every single one of these items. But I think that Geoff was talking about searching under records. You might also want to go to catalog.
Yes, and don't forget that last choice also, which is Research Wiki. Okay.
Right.
Find great stuff there too. Sorry for the interruption.
No, thank you. Especially when you're looking for information about these little towns. You don't know if your family's there. You put in the name of the town. This is one of my little ancestral villages.
You put the town in there.
Put in, and then do a search, and it'll tell you what records are available, whether they're available, by if they're digitally available, if they're online, or whether you have to go to a local church and they'll be sent streamed there. You click these, and it tells you what kind of records you have, and also you can search for books. So make sure that you, as Geoff pointed out, you want to look at the books, and you also want to look at the wikis. Those are very, very helpful.
Okay, that's for the surname. Okay, the records are for the town.
Right,
okay.
Right. So you can do a search under a name here under search. Just put in the first, last name, whatever you have, and do search.
Yeah, I've done that, and I've rarely found anything.
Okay. Just try. Again, you're going down a rabbit hole. You might as well just try everything. But take a look at Family Tree. Take a look at genealogies, catalogs, books, research. The research wikis are very helpful when you don't understand, for example, the Latvian archives or how to work with them. So that there might be some interesting help there. I also went to the Family Tree of the Jewish people, looking for a name like Wager from Latvia, and there are some family trees there with the name of W-E-G-E-R and W-E-G-G-E-R, and I see a Gershon here, so there might be a connection. Again, you just have to click on these links and it'll show you the tree.
That's a really interesting one, because that name of Rivki also shows up.
Mm-hmm. That's what I thought as well. And then and I bet you found this already on Ancestry,
Yeah.
Geoff
Yeah.
and Deb. Okay, you found these records are on Ancestry. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, just wanted to share that with you in case you hadn't seen that.
And-
Don't
and-
forget Family Search. You know, they've got a couple of local libraries in the Triangle. We have one in Chapel Hill. There's one in Cary, so it'd be pretty easy for you to get the records streamed to you at those locations.
Well, I have to give Family Search another chance because I've pretty much given up on it because for my family and Rob's, every time I try to search, I don't find anything.
Well, what you might want to do is actually call the library over that's closest to you, whether it's in Cary or Chapel Hill, and make an appointment with one of the volunteers and ask for a volunteer who knows something about this subject, because they're incredibly helpful. And if you have time to go to Salt Lake City, the place is crawling with experts on every floor, especially the international section where most of us wind up. It's on the 5th floor of the library there. It's a wonderful place to go once you feel safe about traveling. How many of you have been there to the Family History Library in Salt Lake? Yeah, it's just great.
And if I could just pile on once more to Debbie's point, and Debbie Moose, you mentioned that you'd searched on Family Search for surname and not found anything helpful. And I just wanted to point out that still so much of what Family Search holds is not indexed. Okay, and so you're never going to find any of the indexed records searching by the surname. The town can be another way of finding things.
So I have to do it by the town, not the surname?
Yes.
And then what do I do? Look in the town stuff?
Well, yeah, sometimes you go to the year where you know or suspect where a relative was born and, look for a record of their birth, just to use an example.
Okay,
And usually in those metrical records, I'm going back to the days when it was all on microfilm and you were going one by one. You would get, for example, the birth, marriage, and death records called the metrical records for 1938 or 1892. And at the end of every section of records, somebody would have, the clerk would have indexed in order. So you don't have to go through all the records trying to find a name that you can't really read because it's in Russian. You can go to the index. It's just that those haven't been digitized. JRI Poland has been really good about getting all of those indexes translated, and they're up online so we can find the records more easily. But as Geoff has pointed out, these records haven't been, sometimes they've been indexed by the original clerk in Latvia back in the 1800s, but nobody's bothered to digitize them on a spreadsheet, translate them, and load them up into the universe.
Well, maybe the best thing for us to do would be to try to make an appointment to go to one of the libraries like the one in Cary and have somebody help walk us through this, because I rarely have any luck. So there's something I'm not doing right with the search on there.
I think that would be worthwhile.
I agree.
Anybody have any other suggestions for Debbie and Rob?
Is that Meta with her hand up? I guess not.
Okay, Ava, did you? Meta, yes, Meta, you have a hand up. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that. I didn't see it. Did you have a comment, Meta?
Can't hear you. You're garbled.
You can't hear me. Is this any better?
Yes.
Apparently sitting 1 foot over makes a better sound. There are a couple of things that I have found helpful for finding things through Family Search. One of them is if I can't find it by looking through, like navigating through Family Search itself, get off Family Search, describe what you want in Google, and put in that search phrase plus Family Search, and Google may be more effective at getting you to the right source.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Also, if I do find things on Family Search and they're very difficult, to give an example, I found Jewish vital records from a town where I have ancestry, And I spent many hours making sort of my own rough index to it because they looked like they were in random order at first. They were just in a very, very strange order that was convenient to the person who microfilmed them in 1938. But once I had blown all that time and really gotten to understand what kind of stuff was there, you know, I again started searching elsewhere because now I knew exactly what existed, and I knew the possibility that somebody might have done an easier to use job with those records in the intervening, 80 years or so. And that helped me get to the same records and many more in a much easier to use format in an archive.
Well, Debbie, do you have a couple threads to follow here?
Yeah, that's been helpful. Thank you so much. And Rob's gonna have plenty to do when he gets back. He's retired now. He can take over some of this.
Well, Geoff,
But
did you
that's
have
been
any other cases, or that was it, right?
No, that's all I had.
Okay.
That's all?
Can we give Geoff a virtual show of applause? Wow, Geoff, you amaze me. You really do. Obviously, you have a passion for this, just like the rest of us, or should I say an obsession?
Yes.
I hope you've all gotten some really good ideas. I hope you were trying to do some research, picking up some clues that are going to help you in your own research. And I know I also want to give a shout out to Ava, who is going to send you a link to this recording once I get it to her and a little wrap up, so that if you wanted to listen to something over again, you'd be able to do that. We try to do a brick wall at the end of every session. So if you have a brick wall that you can write in a very concise way and send it to Geoff. Geoff, would you put your email address one more time in the chat? Do you know how to do that?
Yes,
Okay.
I will.
We try to tackle one question at the end of every meeting, and we can always do this more often if that's what the membership wants. So I want to thank you all for coming. Again, we've got some exciting things coming up. The census is coming up. I know Robert's going to keep us apprised of that. And I know that a lot of you have a wonderful Passover or Easter in front of you. I wish you a happy return to being with your family. I know we're all keeping an eye on Ukraine because a lot of us have Ukrainian heritage or ancestry or friends or colleagues in Ukraine. And whenever I see something that might be a combination of Ukraine and what's happening there, and genealogists who we know are working there, or the records, I'll post that on Facebook as well. Anybody else have any closing comments for today's very vivacious meeting? I enjoyed it a great deal personally. Well, Maida, again, welcome. Thank you all for the wonderful sharing of ideas on the chat and when you opened up, and good researching to everybody. Be well, stay well, and if a fourth booster gets out there, go and get it. Go and get it before they run out. Take care, everybody. Good job. Great job, Geoff. Wonderful. Stick around if you have any other comments or questions. See, I have to overcome my prejudices about little towns in North Carolina not having any Jews. They definitely were there, weren't they? Yeah, I should know better because Mike did a program on migration for us. I think it was a couple years ago. And I said, how did Jews wind up in Goldsboro? Because there were quite a few. And he said, they got off the boat in Baltimore. They took the train down to the south. They got out, looked around. Hey, nobody's selling any, nobody's a tailor here. I think I'll open up a shop. Rusty?
I'll tell you how they got there. Excuse me, I'm a little hoarse today. They actually had businesses that would set up a new immigrant who didn't have any money, would assign him a district, could be anywhere in the country, especially in the South. And they assigned him a district, gave him his stuff on loan, and he was assigned, and they would that was the first stop for many men who came here. And then what happened was, as they started making money, you know, they'd get more supplies, but they'd be able to pay for it and have some money. So they'd pick a town and settle in that. And then oftentimes they'd open their own store there. And that's how so many department stores with Jewish names on them ended up there. So that's how they got spread, because I wondered how the heck did they get to Chattanooga, Tennessee, you know? And that's what I found when I looked into it. There's a whole lot of stuff.
And I get Chattanooga and Savannah and Atlanta and the bigger cities. It's just how did they find any kindred spirits in places like Randleman? They must have been so lonely.
Well, they probably came later and didn't get the best district. What can I tell you?
I knew one of the Savannah doyens of Jewish society, and that was her story. Exactly that. Her family came down, opened up a store. They became very wealthy, and she became high society among the Jewish women in that town.
And it's a good bet that he was a peddler first.
He was, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
exactly
right.
what happened. Yep.
Yeah, Jordan's grandfather wound up in
Wall Lake, Iowa.
out of
Where?
Wall Lake, Iowa.
Oh my goodness.
600 people.
and he
How many Jews?
One.
he opened a store there too. We have a newspaper article. Also, when we were in Asheville, there were a lot of Jewish people who had stores. There are several generations of some shoe store that's still open now from a Jewish people. So it's interesting how they stayed on the East Coast.
Were they dispersing them? And Rusty, maybe you can answer this question. Were they dispersing the Jews to these far off places because they knew they'd be able to prosper there? Or in the case of my parents who came here post-war, the Jewish organization said, we already have too many Jews in New York. We're sending you to Minneapolis, because there was so much anti-Semitism. They didn't want too many Jews staying in New York. Was it that, Rusty, or a combination?
I don't think so. I haven't heard that suggested in some of the research, but it just suggests that they're naturally going to give the best ones to the first people, you know, and so then you might have to settle. But remember, if most people were rural people in those days, I mean, not the immigrants, the Americans. And so they couldn't just get in the car and go to a store. They had to have somebody come to their house. Gosh, I remember even in Miami when I was a kid, we had the vegetable man come through with his vegetable truck, and we'd all go out and buy their vegetables, you know, even though we could get them at the store, but we wanted to help them out. So I think that's why people just didn't have the access to things that they needed on a certain basis. I don't really remember how frequently they would come, but they would have good sized districts depending on the number of people in the district. That would be how big, but that some of them would have to start on foot carrying their wares on their back until they made a little money and buy a wagon and a horse. So,
well, you know, I know that Jewish people did organize. When my mother and father were in a DP camp, Ort was already there. And Ort was taught my mother how to sew. They were training people actually to go to Palestine in this particular camp, so that when they got to Palestine, they would have marketable skills and skills that this fledgling state would need. So it's really a remarkable story of organization too, isn't it? Renee, did you want to say something as well?
I wanted to, it's not North Carolina, but of all places, I always wondered, why did my father's family end up in South Bend, Indiana? Another place that was not exactly a center of Jewish life, unlike Washington Heights, which had over 20,000 Jewish families settled there, one of the largest German Jewish communities. So one of the things I found out, and it made me think about some of these research conundrums. My father's oldest sister wasn't happy anymore in Germany. Her fiance went to fight in World War I, and I think he died. And there was no, I don't know that she thought of school. That wasn't exactly a focus in Frankfurt for women. So another relative couldn't make it on this ship, which left somewhere, I don't know, around 1915, 19 something, to the United States. So I don't even know that she traveled under her own name to the United States, to New York, but then went to South Bend and Mishawaka, met a man whose Russian Jewish family were peddlers, and ended up having a very large store in Mishawaka. And of note, they call it, I don't know if you've heard of it, the Michiana Jewish Historical.
Yeah,
So
I
a lot
have.
of my relatives are all in this. And one of my first cousins from Evanston, his name is Henry Gewirtz, he said, gee, golly gosh, Renee, I didn't even know about this. And he grew up. But what I found out is some of the clues were in court documents. I found this magnificent court document that part of the family, they were the Nevilles, but they really were once the Novelskis or something Russian. They sponsored the part of my family that barely made it out of France in 1938 or 39, but they didn't land in New York. And I don't know if it's for the same reasons your family, but they all went and lived with relatives in these crowded conditions in South Bend and Mishawaka. So they couldn't be found if it was the year for the census or something. And then once they got on their feet, they got their own houses or apartments. That I just wanted to share that because New York is so different. Growing up in Manhattan, but now that I'm looking at to where all my relatives have landed all over this country and the world, my brother and I are learning these little stories through reading all these documents. Yeah. It's pretty remarkable.
And we are so much a reflection of the towns that we grew up in. That's why I was thinking for these families to be the first Jewish family in the town, it could have been very isolating. Imagine growing up in an area where you're the only one. It could have been very, very difficult. Well, folks, I want to thank you again for coming today. I hope the Millers were able to find something of interest. And Ava and Renee and Jeff and Rusty, thank you so much for being here. Susan, you too. I can see you're still hanging in there. I hope you have a really wonderful day for the rest of the
Thank you.
what's left.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.